I had a certain ambivalence towards doing this sort of genre. As I said, it was not something that I loved. But I was intrigued by the idea of presenting anything that was exceptionally truthful, because I felt that most of the films that I'd seen that were made in America for popular audiences were distortions, and quite often would present violence in a way that was either operatic or balladic or simply ellipted.
Please, God.
This is God.
The 1970s through the 1990s were a golden age for slashers, a time when mass killers, final girls, and gruesome kills became a staple of horror cinema. This era wasn't just about scares, it was a cultural takeover. These films reflected the fears and fantasies of their time, celebrated by audiences across the globe.
Fantastic movie.
It's really gross.
It was really terrific.
In this episode, we'll dive into the rise of the slasher genre, tracing its evolution from low-budget thrillers to blockbuster franchises. We'll uncover the stories behind the biggest films, explore their cultural impact, and reveal how these killers became legends in their time.
Welcome to my world.
The golden years began with a bang in the late 1970s.
We wanted to do something that hadn't been done, because there was, in cinema in those days, you would run, someone would get stuck with a knife and they were instantly dead. And I'd been through a terrible car accident and with a skull fracture and all, and I knew that people have spasms. And so I just wanted to try to mirror reality.
Filmmakers took the basic formula of earlier horror films and started crafting gruesome cinematic art. At the forefront of this movement was John Carpenter's 1978 classic,
Halloween.
a film often credited with launching the slasher era.
My job in making Halloween was to do an exploitation horror film. Then the basic premise was given to me by my distributor, Irwin Yablans. He said, let's do a movie about these babysitters who get stalked by a killer. He figured that everybody could identify with babysitting. So many teenagers had done it. And then a little bit later, he came up with the idea of calling it Halloween. Let's set it on Halloween night and call it Halloween. Never been used as a title before. Never been used at all. It was an underutilized holiday, so great. And I was a young director then. I was hungry for experience, hungry for features. I had done some work before then. I said, sure, why not?
With a shoestring budget of $325,000, Carpenter crafted a suspenseful tale of a mass killer stalking babysitters in the suburban streets of Haddonfield. The film's success was unprecedented. It introduced Michael Myers, Laurie Strode, and the now iconic concept of the final girl, a survivor who outsmarts the killer.
What I love most about slashers are not the monsters. What I love most about slashers is watching badass women take those monsters down. These women are known as the final girls, and they are strong and resilient. Laurie Strode in Halloween, Ellen Ripley in Alien, Nancy Thompson in A Nightmare on Elm Street, Sidney Prescott in Scream. These final girls are iconic and influential. But who is the final girl? The final girl as a concept was originally defined and identified by scholar Carol Clover in her 1992 book, Men, Women, and Chainsaws. Clover explains that the final girl is chased, cornered, and wounded. Audiences watch as she screams, staggers, falls, rises, and screams again. She alone looks death in the face and not only fights back, but does so with ferocity. In the end, the final girl is the one who did not die.
Halloween didn't just scare audiences. It showed Hollywood that slashers could be lucrative. Imitators quickly followed, each putting their own spin on the formula. Films like Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Child's Play turned killers into cultural icons, spawning countless sequels, merchandise, and legions of fans. The slasher genre became a Hollywood hit, dominating the 1980s. But while some films found creative ways to innovate, others leaned heavily into tropes, leading to a flood of formulaic sequels. By the late 1980s, the cracks in the golden era were starting to show. Among the wave of iconic franchises, none captured the imaginations of audiences quite like Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street. Released in 1984, the film introduced Freddy Krueger, a burnt, claw-gloved killer who stalked teenagers in their dreams. Craven's vision was unique, blending supernatural horror with slasher thrills.
Nightmare on Elm Street came out of a series of articles in the LA Times, if I'm not mistaken, starting in, I would guess, in the late 70s. They were, as I remember, about 3 to 6 months apart, and they were not correlated. That is, the LA Times, for whatever reasons, did not sort of catch that they had had a story about this before. They were all very small, and essentially they would go like, some young man, usually of Southeast Asian origin, had been reported to have died in the middle of a nightmare.
The strong script needed a strong Freddy. New Line Cinema picked Robert Englund, and the rest is history. Robert Englund's performance turned Freddy into a household name, and the success of the first film led to several sequels by 1994, including the groundbreaking A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, and Craven's meta horror hit, New Nightmare. But Freddy's journey wasn't without challenges. As the sequels grew more extravagant, critics accused the franchise of losing its edge, favoring comedy and spectacle over a scare factor. Still, Nightmare left its mark on the genre, proving that slashers could be both terrifying and inventive. As the 1980s progressed, studios recognized the financial potential of the slasher franchises. Friday the 13th became a yearly tradition, churning out sequel after sequel with increasingly crazy premises. Jason Voorhees went from a vengeful son to an undead killing machine, eventually donning his iconic hockey mask in Friday the 13th Part 3. Meanwhile, Michael Myers returned in Halloween 2, but the franchise took a bold detour with Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, which abandoned the killer altogether. Audiences rejected this experiment, forcing the series back to its roots in Halloween 4. By the 1990s, the sheer volume of sequels and diminishing returns began to take its toll. Films like Jason Takes Manhattan and Freddy's Dead struggled to draw audiences, signaling the end of the golden era. While the golden years of slashers were defined by the box office dominance, they also reflected the anxieties of their time. These films often centered on teenagers, tapping into fears about growing up, authority figures, and societal expectations. They became a rite of passage for young audiences, a thrilling, cathartic experience in the safety of a theater. Critics, however, weren't always kind.
There is a difference between good and scary movies and movies that systematically demean half the human race. There is a difference between movies which are violent but entertaining and movies that are gruesome and despicable. There is a difference between a horror movie and a freak show.
Slashers were accused of being formulaic and misogynistic, but over time, scholars and fans began to recognize the genre's deeper themes and cultural significance. The genre even hit a peak in 1993 with Silence of the Lambs winning Best Picture at the Academy Awards.
And the Oscar goes to The Silence of the Lambs.
The golden years gave us more than just memorable movies. They gave us legends. These films defined a generation, and their influence is still felt today.
The late great Hannibal Lecter. He's a wonderful man.
But as the 1990s came to a close, the genre faced a new challenge: oversaturation in the changing cultural landscape. Would the slasher survive? In our next episode, we'll rewind even further to the birth of the slasher, exploring the roots of the genre and the films that paved the way for its golden years, from Italian Giallo to the earliest of slashers. We'll uncover how this blood-soaked phenomenon began. Stay tuned for episode 4 of Slashers Unmasked, Slasher Origins. Make sure to follow and subscribe to never miss out on any of our videos. This has been Rapid Review. See you at the movies.